CHEK Podcasts.
Hi, welcome to Chamber Chats. I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. And as always, we are recording today in the podcasting studios here at CHEK Media Group, one of our chamber champions. I always like to acknowledge that I live and work in the unceded ancestral territory of the Lekwungen-speaking nations known to us as the Songhees and the Esquimalt. And Chamber Chats is made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union. I think most of you know I'm a former broadcaster, and every time I walk into this building to see what has happened here, I'm very impressed and amazed by the way that this whole company and this whole operation has come along compared to what was going on a few years back when it didn't look all that promising. We're going to talk about that in this whole success story today with my friend and colleague, Rob Germain, who is the CEO. I'm a chief executive officer. You're a chief ownership officer.
Chief employee owner.
Employee owner, that's right, at CHEK, because you're now employee owned.
Exactly.
Yeah. You have a picture framed in the wall of your office that I see every time I'm in your office that kind of is where this story begins. But tell me about that picture.
Yeah, that picture is a photo of the screen outside the Save on Foods Memorial Center, August 31st, 2009. And the Times Colonist was displaying their headlines on that screen in those days. And the front page of the newspaper that day and the headline that was on the screen said, "CHEK TV could fade to black tonight."
Yeah.
And it's a reminder to me of just how close it came to this station not being here.
Yeah. That was an ownership thing with CanWest Global, as I recall. Is that what was going on?
CanWest Global had owned the station for 9 years. It was running into trouble. It was the financial recession, 2008, 2009, and they were closing stations. And everybody at CHEK had been given layoff notices. The station was to close on Labor Day of 2009. We said, no, we're not going to let that happen.
Yeah.
At least it took us some time to get them to change their minds, but it went right to the last minute before we were able to pull it out at the last second.
It's no secret to anybody that things in the media landscape are not looking all that rosy. I mean, you saw major announcements by a network closing radio and television stations not that long ago, last month. Newspapers have been faltering for a while. Magazines are relatively strong. But in that world of turmoil and difficult sustainability, how is it that you're doing so well? What are you doing right?
Well, I really believe in the employee ownership model, for one. Decisions that are made here with people that know the market, able to be nuanced and try some stuff and not be afraid to take risks. It hasn't been rosy the whole time, I have to say, but we are having some success.
So when you do something like that, you take over the company, employee-owned means that everybody buys shares or puts money forward. You must have had other investors get involved, though. I know that my friend and yours, Levi Sampson, was involved in that. So tell me about him.
Absolutely. Sampson family is a big reason why we're here today, and also why Harmac Mill in Nanaimo is also employee-owned and also a success story. And CHEK had been covering that story in 2008 when that mill had been closed and the employees there had been laid off. And then their parent company was in receivership. The employees put in a bid to take over the mill and were successful in that bid. And we did the story, of course, when they reopened it, and it was a great success story. A year later, we found ourselves in a very similar situation, needing to get investors. So we sought some advice. I phoned Levi to ask him how they did it. What was their corporate structure? I know they had their union involved. They had local investors, as well as the employees that all put in money. And Levi offered to provide some consultation, advice to us, and then wanted to know next if we could see our business plan, because he and his family are big supporters of the employee ownership model. And sure enough, the Sampson family and others offered to back, the employees at CHEK. Our union also put in money, and the national union and other locals also put in money. Community-minded investors that wanted to see CHEK and the employees, keep it going, continue to service the community. Levi Sampson became our board chair and continues to be our board chair today.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, there was some touch and go times in the early going. That happens. It's almost like a startup in a way.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what happens, right? But as you've carried through right up till today, for that matter, you've done a lot of we overuse the word pivot, but you've done some pivots and some shifts and some changes and introduced different technologies. And for example, this program and other ones like it that you do here
Yeah.
is all a part of what this station looks like now because you have full control of your content. You don't have to call somebody in Toronto or someplace to get approval for this. You can do your own thing. But tell me about how it's evolved, better use of technology, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we did have some tough times early on, and actually, at one point, we kind of hit a wall, and everybody took a pay cut
I remember that. Yeah.
across the board, management right down, because rather than seeing people laid off, we decided it was better we all kind of tightened our belts. We got through that. We have been investing in our equipment. We've been investing in new technologies so that we can be, live on location places. We've invested in podcasting. We're investing in an over-the-top streaming service, our CHEK Plus. So we are trying to be everywhere that the consumer is. We're trying to be a modern media organization, not just your father's TV station.
Which in some cases you still are, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that.
When you take a look at the growth, when did you turn the corner? When did you realize, oh my gosh, we're going to start making money now? Because that's the ambition of any business. And when did that start to happen for you guys?
I mean, it took probably 5-6 years before we started to sort of get our feet under us. It's still, there's still lots of challenges ahead, no question about that. The media landscape is changing fast. There's still a lot of digital disruption. When we started as an employee owners, there was I think Netflix existed, but it was still doing mail order CD-ROMs or something like that, So there's a lot of changes going on. We're just trying to stay ahead of it.
You and I are guys who worked through this industry for a long time, and we kind of knew the old model of what intensely local television was all about.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of that in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And all the way through, the understanding was there that you need to support your community, not just draw revenue. You need to support the community and be available, which you still do. And why is that so important?
It's our raison d'etre to serve the community. We've been based on Vancouver Island since 1956. We've been mandated to serve the community as a licensed broadcaster, but it's also our mission. Yeah. And so our advertisers aren't just, a source of revenue. They're our partners. And we bring the community together. We bring, the people that watch our news, watch our programming, we bring them together with our advertisers, most of whom are also local. And it's really a great ecosystem that everybody benefits from.
Yeah, and as you say, the local folks may advertise with you, but that's an opportunity for them as much as it is for you, because they then can take advantage of the impact and the reach of CHEK to sell their product or service. That's local, right? That's what it is.
That's local, and people like to support local. And I tell you, it doesn't feel quite so much as an intrusive ad when it's your neighbor that's advertising or telling you about a service they're doing.
We're going to talk about the necessity to be involved in the reporting of local news, especially breaking and emerging news. We're going to do that next. Our guest on Chamber Chats today is Rob Germain. He's the CEO here at the CHEK Media Group. This whole thing with Meta and not putting content in for local, we'll get into that in a second. But another integral role of local television like you guys is to put issues in front of people that they may or may not know or may not understand. What's the importance of providing coverage for local news?
Oh, well, it's a pillar of our democracy. I mean, we need to have informed electorate. And just people need to be able to know what are issues that are important in their community. And we get a lot of feedback from our viewers as to what's important to them. And I think we have a pretty good handle on what's important to our viewers.
It's also important, of course, to present a local perspective on things that happened in Vancouver, in Toronto, in Ukraine, in Syria. Yeah. Tell me about weaving that stuff into what you do for providing local news.
Well, really, we're trying to help the viewer. We're trying to curate. There's a lot going on, and it's impossible to stay abreast of everything. But if we can help curate that for them, hey, this is probably what you need to know. This is probably what is important to you. Take the work out of it for them. Make it easy. One-stop shopping. You probably have more sources of news than just CHEK, of course. But we can boil it down for you and tell you the important things of the day. And also, share some success stories about
Mhm.
what's happening locally and positive stories as well.
I think another key to that too is that you localize things that happen elsewhere. You know, you might speak with a Syrian family or a Ukrainian
Hmm.
family or something. That provides another perspective on it all, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So we try to bring some context, try to relate issues that maybe on a macro scale relatable to local people.
We referred a little while ago about the unfortunate situation at the other TV station on the Vancouver Island market, which is owned and operated by Bell Media, which is a large national network. So there are advantages to being a part of a big network, but there are also tremendous advantages to being local like you
Hmm.
are. So tell me about those advantages.
Yeah, well, the advantage, first of all, is knowing the market and making decisions that are right for this market. I mean, when we were owned by what at the time was the largest corporate media entity in Canada, there were a lot of decisions that were coming down that were not right for this market. They might have been beneficial for the overall company, but people here questioned it, and so this gives us an opportunity to make decisions here that and respond the way we think it's best for our viewers.
Yeah. And that unique take on things here, we deal with that at the chamber because we're on an island. You know,
Hmm.
I can talk to people on a national level all the time about things, and they talk about what's going on here and what's going on there, and Lower Mainland and places like that. But we have these unique both opportunities and challenges in being on an island, and you guys tell those stories, and you tell them in a good way, don't you?
All over Vancouver Island as well. We have
Yeah.
bureaus in Nanaimo, we have bureaus in the Comox Valley, and yeah, we this is our home, and so wherever the story is on Vancouver Island, we're going to be bringing those stories to you.
So we're going to talk about some of the stuff that you've created for content that's been the real points of traction for you with the audience right now. So the most recent disruption after the financial situation in '08 and '07, '08 was the COVID-19 pandemic. That came along. Um, People were no longer doing sports coverage because there wasn't any. People weren't gathering, so you didn't need a sportscast anymore. So that gave birth to the Upside. Tell me about that story and how
Yeah,
that came around.
we'd been kind of contemplating about a positive news segment for a long time, but when COVID, forced us all into lockdowns, and it meant we could only have one person in our studio. We had to have weather remote. We had no sports suddenly to cover. Our sports director and our sports staff. In a lot of cases, a lot of newsrooms, those people got laid off.
Hmm.
We decided we didn't want to do that. We felt this was an important time. We needed to put all hands on deck in covering this story, this most important story, and at the same time, how could we maybe provide some coverage that was not all doom and gloom? And so, yeah, out of this came the Upside. Jeff King, Ed Bain were on location. We could only had one camera that in the field that they could utilize because even our control room we had to slim down because of social distancing, etc. So Ed and Jeff happened to be on the same location. They were doing their report. Jeff was assigned to do a positive news segment, which we called the Upside, and it's turned into a phenomenon where they, were visiting locations and businesses and celebrating people coming together to help one another during that really difficult time, and it's continued on. It's evolved, but it's continued on. It's been probably our most positive segment in our newscast for several years now.
Yeah. And of course, it's been an opportunity to promote local for people to understand how easy it is to shop local or experience local or do something local. And that's been the backbone of it.
Yeah, particularly during the lockdowns when so many businesses, small businesses especially, were really suffering and on the edge of going out of business. Jeff and Ed were visiting all those locations to let people know, hey, these guys are still around and they're doing curbside pickup or what have you. Any way that we could support local businesses, that was part of our mandate.
That's got to be pretty good for morale, I would think, in the halls to have that kind of success.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people take a lot of pride in what we're doing here and the service we're providing and the response we're getting.
Yeah. Uh, what happened to the viewing numbers, the ratings when the pandemic happened? Because everybody was at home. I assume everybody was watching television. I was. So that must have made a difference in that whole
Yeah, we
ratings
kind
thing.
of had a captive audience, I guess you
Yeah.
could say, and we saw our ratings jump 70%.
Wow.
People were tuning in to get the daily numbers, of course, watching those very closely. But they were staying for some of the positive news as well with the upside, and it was really important for us to make sure that we delivered what people were really looking for. That's where we could really prove our worth through that pandemic. And even outside of the newscast, we were breaking into programming. I think we broke into programming 200 times over a 12-month period. Daily, we were doing gavel-to-gavel coverage of all the public health hearings and just stepping up as much as we could.
Because you can make that call yourself. You don't have to pick up the phone and call somebody somewhere.
Exactly.
It's all up to you, right?
Exactly. If you're part of a network, breaking into regular programming, almost unheard of these days. We could do it, just without any having to get any clearance.
Yeah. So public sport events went away, and before they came back again, you actually did undertake something that covers sports and talks about it. We're going to talk about that next. Guest today on Chamber Chats is Rob Germain. He is the CEO here at the CHEK Media Group. So the upside came about because you didn't have any sports to cover anymore. But then again, all of these podcast things you're doing, Donnie and Dolly came along. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, Donnie and Dolly, that's one of those things where, we can act quickly on opportunities that we see come along. Bell Media had changed the format of one of their all sports stations in Vancouver, TSN 1040, Team 1040 as it used to be known, and laid off a whole bunch of sports talk hosts that were quite popular, had a following in the market, but Bell Media decided to change the format. We saw an opportunity to hire a couple of the laid-off sportscasters, Don Taylor, who's a legend in this market, Rick Dollywall, who's one of the most knowledgeable sports and hockey commentators. We brought them to CHEK and created a podcast, a vodcast, a broadcast. They now broadcast 10 to noon daily during the hockey season at least. They're on hiatus at the moment. It's become quite a popular program, and we brought a lot of sponsors in that had sponsored them on radio. So it works. As a multimedia show, it's a podcast. It's live on television. It's available for streaming, live or on demand, and clips on YouTube and Twitter. So yeah, it's a new model, and a lot of our other programming we're sort of basing on that sort of same model.
And they're pretty big hitters, to use a sports term, but they are, like you say, these are very well versed and experienced guys.
Yeah, they're pros and really entertaining, actually, and we get a lot of feedback about that program.
The other duo is Steele and Vance. That's an interesting conversation that they have too, because they have an amazing dynamic between the two of them.
Linda Steele and Jody Vance. Yeah, two broadcast professionals that they were planning on doing their own podcast and came to us, and it just was an opportunity.
Yeah. The other things that you're doing involve different sort of platforms and different thematic things. Our Native Land is something that's a very informative, very accurate look at what happens within the Indigenous world. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, when we decided to get into podcasting, our very first podcast was Our Native Land with Chadis Leo, a young broadcaster, had worked in community television and radio, is an Indigenous broadcaster from the Homolko First Nation on northern Vancouver Island. And Chadis is won a national award for the program and has been 2.5 seasons now with Our Native Land, and is also a video journalist with CHEK News.
Yeah. Van Culler is along the same lines, right? That's again something that's Mo Amir that does that.
Mo Amir, yeah.
And it covers that diversity, equity, inclusion part.
Well, yeah, that's brings some diversity to our programming. Mo Amir, This is Van Culler, is broadcasting in prime time on Thursday nights along with Steele and Vance. It's a culture and politics podcast and broadcast, and quite popular.
Speaking of heavy hitters, Rob Shaw has been a heavy hitter at the legislature for a long time as a reporter for print, has now come over to work with you guys to do political capital. That's it's a bit of a coup. It's kind of cool to have a guy with that equity in the mix, isn't it?
Yeah, we really value Rob and the analysis that he brings to our viewers and our audience weeknights on Check News. Also creates Political Capital, which is a weekly podcast.
Cooking on the Coast has been around for a while, but that's had a bit of a shift lately too.
Cooking on the Coast, yeah, we have a new chef, Heidi Fink,
Yeah.
last season. We've just taped brand new episodes for coming this September for some new recipes and new culinary experiences.
Mike check was kind of a fun thing to do too, right?
Mic check. Yes, that was our first, other than our native land. Joe Perkins
Mhm.
began Mic Check. Now Paul Haysom is going to be taking that over in the very near future.
He's going to come back to join the family, hasn't he?
Paul Haysom has come back. He's our anchor at 6 o'clock. Joe Perkins has been named news director.
Mhm.
So Paul, who started here, has been working for Global Calgary and Global Vancouver. Global BC has now come back to Czech. Yeah.
And many people would probably know his dad, who also has a connection to here and to Global too, with Ian.
Yes, Ian Haysom.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can recall him being around in conversations when you were working through this new model too. So he's a guy that brought years of experience, and I'm sure also didn't want to see this go away.
Absolutely. Ian's been a great supporter of Czech and of myself. Been a mentor to me and a great friend.
So we've looked at the past and we've looked at the current situation. Let's look into the future now. We are all expecting further disruptions in what could be called conventional or traditional media, which you still kind of align with.
Mhm.
You've diversified into these sorts of platforms that you're
Mhm.
doing. But in the future, you're going to have to stay nimble. You're going to have to
Mhm.
keep making innovative choices and decisions. What kind of things do you think are coming up? What do you have to deal with?
Well, I think we're going to continue to see changes in the media landscape. No question about that. I think we're in a pretty good position, though. I think we've got a good market. We've got loyalty in the market, and we've got people who are dedicated to that market. And so I think, if I don't, I think it's going to be challenging for everyone. But I think we've got a pretty good position here in what we've been building, and the fact we've got investing in technology that we can sort of go wherever the viewers are, wherever the consumers are. And there's always going to be a need for local news. There's always going to be a niche, I think, for local programming opportunities. So I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to be around. Our whole mission, if you will, is to be sustainable in the long term.
Which means that the threat of fading to black will never happen.
We sure hope so.
Probably not. Rob Germain, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Rob Germain is the CEO here at the CHEK Media Group, and I'm Bruce Williams. We'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.